Simon, first, thank you very much for sharing your time with us today. Can you tell us what it is you do now? Like, what is it that engages you in your time?
Well, first of all, I grew up in the Arctic. I was born up here and spent rest of my life up here, except for a very brief period where I had to go what we call down south. It's not really down south, Churchill, Manitoba, for further education back in late 60s because I reached the highest grade level in the community, so I had to go somewhere else to further for my further education. So I am very passionate about the environment, very passionate about my culture and the language, and of course the wildlife. So that's why I've been in the government for since day one in 1999, and I went through few departments at the pleasure of the premier, of course, but my longest term was a deputy minister of Department of Environment. Now I am in a new department, which I was transferred to about 10 months ago with Culture, Language, Elders, and Youth.
Great. Can you tell us a little bit about, basically, when we talked earlier, you were saying that you felt there should be culture and heritage because it's inclusive of all those things. Can you describe basically what it is that that department is trying to do?
Our department is mandated to preserve, enhance, revitalize the Inuit language, culture, and at the same time provide programming and assistance to the elders, and at the same time promote the youth in pride of their culture and the language. So basically that's what we do as a department, and also at the same time we do provide funding contributions at a community level so that elders could run their programs at the community level instead of government telling them what program they should be running. And same thing with the youth. We are also responsible for any archaeological sites in Nunavut. We're also responsible and has a mandate under Inuit Language Protection Act and in Official Languages Act to promote and implement the Inuit Languages Protection Act. So these are new legislation. These are challenges that we will be tackling starting today and for a long time for the future.
In a number of occasions in this past decade, the last 5 years more so, in conversations about sustainability, is that Nunavut has been viewed by much of the international world as a shining example of the connection to the land, the conversations that take place where you can't separate the people from the environment. So if I can ask a couple of questions about your own background and coming through that other portfolio of environment now, and how you see that manifesting itself in the future for your people in dealing with like adaptation, for example.
Yes. My upbringing, especially in my age group, is that you are brought up in the environment. You are taught as a small child to respect the environment and the wildlife, and you are taught harvesting techniques, hunting techniques if you are a boy, and at the same time you are taught to respect the wildlife and don't take more than what you need. Sometimes I think that if we had an agriculture up here, I think things would have been quite different. Our attitude towards wildlife might have been quite different. For example, if I go out caribou hunting, maybe I would think more about sports hunting instead of harvesting for food. So our thinking attitude might have been a little bit different. But because there is no agriculture up here, our respect for wildlife and environment and our connectivity to environment is very, very strong. And in fact, we were told and taught that you don't talk about bad things about wildlife. You don't talk about bad things about polar bear or caribou, whales, walrus, or anything. Because according to Inuit tradition, that if you have talked about wildlife in a bad way or making fun out of wildlife, that sometime within your lifetime it will come back to you an unexpected way. Meaning, if I'm out on the land, if I talked about a polar bear in negative way, not talking about it may have disappeared from my thoughts long time ago, but the polar bear will remember it, and I may get attacked by polar bears. That's where the respect comes from the upbringing and being taught by the parents.
Simon, in your previous portfolio, obviously you were heavily involved with helping with the climate change legislation that's come forward, and those four major strands, are they called kaput? I think I'm pronouncing them. The four strands of the sled that tie everything together.
I did see the end result of that product. I know I was working on it when I was with the department.
The interesting thing was that with those strands, there was a strong crossover in terms of what we have seen in the promotion of the IQ and those relationship components again. It was a strong tying back in with the environment. Within the portfolio that you have now, do you see opportunities to help people to tie some of those things together? Or do you find that there are so many things happening in terms of just the cultural changes and as it was shared with us the other day, more people are thinking about the impact of the dollar and the cost of living than climate change. How does one sort of make sense of that?
Well, I am hoping that many of the government initiatives are tied or based on Inuit traditional knowledge, Inuit societal values, because they are still there, except that majority of the people are not practicing them or not listening to them. So if we're talking about the climate change, the first thing we need to do is talk to the elders, what they know about the historical knowledge of the environment and the climate when they were younger, 60, 80 years ago, and their observation what it is today. And they could tell you a whole story of the changes they have seen, more of the negative changes they have seen. I asked an elder some years ago, he's no longer with us today, that instead of relying on weather information, weather forecast that we get on daily basis, I was planning to go on a weekend, on a camping or hunting. I don't know what my purpose was at that time. And I approached this elder and I asked him, can you tell me what our weather will be like over the weekend? He thought for a moment and said, I don't know, I'm not God. And right there and then, I became aware that the elders' knowledge of the environment is so much affected by climatic changes that are indirectly not our own fault, that it is more and more difficult for elders to predict the weather, how it's going to be next 24 hours or 48 hours, because they used to tell a year in advance what the season is going to be, but not today.
So with that, just sharing that last story, what does that mean for the young people? What you prescribe as we move forward? And we're trying to build off of the knowledge from the elders, whether it's traditional ecological knowledge or the values of the Inuit people. What do you see being necessary for the young? I'll just use one example that was shared a couple days ago, and that is some things about the North do not change, and that's change. So they have to be observant, they have to observe what's going on around them, and they have to be creative to be able to meet those challenges. So what is it you see in terms of this next generation? What is it we're going to try and develop for skills for those young people?
For younger generation, we need to continue to educate them. We need to continue to educate them about the traditional knowledge and the need to respect the environment and the wildlife. We need to continue that. I have taught, give lecture on many occasions. And I recall one time talking to high school students about environment. And I told them that people have claimed to conquer Mount Everest. People have claimed to conquer the North Pole, the South Pole, the deepest ocean, whatever needs to be conquered, even the space. I said, yes, some people have succeeded in reaching their goals on all kinds of expeditions. And yes, a lot of people, many people, have not returned trying to achieve what's impossible out there. The reason some people succeeded was because the environment allows them to do it. If they're fighting against the environment, they're not going to survive. They may have modern equipment, modern technology, modern anything they need to do what's challenged. But one thing that they need to understand is that if the environment doesn't allow them, they're not going to come back alive. So that was my message to young students that I talked to. So education, teaching them is very important, very critical.
What do you see as some of the major challenges that your people will face in this next decade?
I think evolving our culture, evolving environment, and modern technologies that we have become to depend on is so used that sometimes you forget to use your own senses and rely on something else, like internet, the weather forecast, your GPS, whatever. And sometimes I have seen too many times that especially young people will try, they think they're the best. They're macho, so they'll hop on their skidoo, springtime, go for a ride for a day, for afternoon, and sometimes they don't come back or get lost because they're not prepared. If they got lost, if the weather comes down, if there's a whiteout, then we had to send search and rescue. And many of them perished because they don't check or ask elders or check the weather before they go. When I was a young man, we were living in the camp. Just to give you an example, I really wanted to go back to Pond Inlet. We were 150 kilometers from Pond Inlet, living in the camp between Clyde River and Pond Inlet. We had plans to go to Pond Inlet to get some supplies. And we knew that we were going soon. But of course, the camp leader didn't say when, but soon. I got impatient, and I said, it's nice out, beautiful spring weather. Not really spring weather, but I believe that was in March. It was still cold. He didn't tell me, but almost told me, don't go. We'll go together because the storm is coming. And of course, as a young man with a skidoo and kamorik, off I went. A few hours later, it started snowing. And it got dark. And it kept snowing. And became a whiteout condition on a sea ice, and you could see nothing. The stupid thing I did was I continued going and going and going. And eventually, I start getting into a dark area. And I look back at the back of my skidoo, and it started going through a thin ice. Boy, that scared me. So I was really, really lucky to be able to turn around and back to the solid ice. And as I was trying to retrace my tracks, they keep disappearing from the wind, from the blowing snow. And I was completely lost. And eventually, I decided to stop and wait it out. So I did stop, slept for a few hours, woke up, sunshine, but because I kept going and going, I didn't have enough fuel left either to go back to the camp or to Pond Inlet. So I put myself in a very bad situation because I didn't listen to the elder. And luckily, out of nowhere, it was like God sent. A skidoo was coming from the mainland, came to me, and he asked me, where are you going? I said, Pond Inlet. But I don't have enough gas. So he gave me some gas, enough to go back to our camp. And when I went back to the camp, it was a very embarrassing moment for me for not listening to the advice of the elder. He said, we'll go in few days. He didn't say, we'll go in Wednesday or Thursday, but he said, we'll go in few days. But I got impatient and put that myself in a very very bad situation.
Using that as a very powerful example, what little some of us have learned of the ways of the elders here in Nunavut is that in many cases they're watching for the young to be observant and watch them in the way they do things. And that then afterwards sharing as the young person tries to do the same is provide some advice as they move along. In that traditional or more traditional way of being able to observe, it's almost like an apprenticeship model. What are the changes now with schooling and the way young people are learning? Do you find that there's quite a division and a lack of ability to learn those basic competencies or skills that are necessary?
It's not so much about schooling, and it's not so much about elders passing on their traditional knowledge or knowledge to the younger generation. It is the separation of the family kinship. When a young person turns 16, 20, whatever, they're gone. And when they're gone, there is hardly any daily or ongoing connection from the main family, from the parents, with that person. So this connection has to do with the loss of parents or elders teaching their children on a daily basis about survival and everything else. Because today, if my parents were still alive today, if they tell me, that's an order and I have to listen to it. But the situation today is so different. If I tell my 20 years old son or whatever, don't do it or do it this way, that person will have a right to say, I don't have to listen to you, which is sad. Our cultural upbringing was that what our parents told us or taught us seemed very kind of useless. Why are they telling me? It's only after you grow up and become adult that you start coming back to their advice. Oh, that's what they told me before. And you start finally adapting their advice to your current situation. But with everything so fast-paced today, with the culture and so many distractions in the community, even in Nunavut, that it is getting more and more difficult to get attention span, either for children or for the teenagers or for the young people. So it's a family separation that is making it more and more difficult to provide guidance and advice to your children.
And it sounds like that's part of the heart of what you have to deal with within your portfolio and what you're trying to help all of Nunavut
Yes.
to overcome. So what do you see on the horizon that's positive about that? Have you seen some changes? Yes, some of these things are seriously challenging, but every once in a while when you think that, well, we're not making any headway, you go, but there's an example where things are starting to happen.
Yes, I'm starting to see a very positive things happening in Nunavut. For example, one area is education. Teenagers are graduating from high school. Adults are coming back through Arctic College. There are more graduations. And we are seeing with the cultural program that children and teenagers are more and more interested to bring their culture and their language. If we can continue that trend, even though there are other negativity things out there, but if we could make the culture and language strong and family strong, that yes, I am very positive the future is bright. You know, Nunavut is young. It's still, I still call it a baby, you know. It's only 12 years old, a teenager. So we need to grow. And we will grow with the teenagers today, and they'll become the leaders of the future. So that is what my vision is.
So I go back to one of the early documents, it was Canadians First Canadians. And that, for me, I was always very touched by that symbolism as well. What do Canadians, people like myself across Canada, what do they need to know about the North, about Nunavut?
Well, we need to educate Southerners, or Southerners especially, who doesn't have any idea what Nunavut or the Arctic is like. Some people may think that we still live in the igloos. Some people may think that we still have, everybody still have dog teams. And majority of people may think that Arctic is barren, there's nothing there, nothing grows. But we need to teach them that the Nunavut, the Arctic, is thriving. It's a beautiful territory. There are people living up here, and we want to show that even though our numbers are small, our territory is very huge, that we could contribute immensely to Canada. In order to do that, Canada needs to help us first. Then we could contribute when we get proper resources and proper tools to do that. So we need to educate Southerners that, yes, Nunavut is not only a handout, we could contribute if we're given a chance. And we will contribute, and we will stand by the vision of Canada as a whole. We're all in this together. You know, we're not isolated. We seem to be isolated, but we are not. You know, when I go to Ottawa, it's less than 3 hours, and Vancouver is further away. So we're closer than Vancouver to Ottawa. You know? We're not far.
Well, Simon, I know that you have many things to do. Is there anything that you would like to share that you think that we haven't had a chance to talk about, and that we should let teachers and others within the South know?
I think the biggest advice that I can give is to be patient. I was involved with the actual land claims negotiations, and I was involved as an executive director designing the government of Nunavut. Now I'm in the government, so I went through all 3 stages of the process. But the biggest hurdle was the land claims negotiations itself. And it took 20-odd years to achieve that goal. We didn't mind. Inuit didn't mind. And I use an analogy that when you go out seal hunting in winter through a seal hole, you don't know where the seals are, but you can see there are holes here and there, breathing holes. And you got hunting partners with you. You want to get the seal, so you wait and you wait. And in those days, Inuit used to wait for hours because there may be only one or two people instead of 4 or 5 like we do today. They wait. They knew eventually the seal is gonna come. Or eventually somebody, their hunting partner, will get it and they'll feed their family. We do the same thing today. I may not get the seal myself. My friends might get it, but still we will share our catch. So that is why patience is very important. We have long-term vision, and if we wait long enough, we will reach our goal. It's like waiting for a seal in the seal hole. So be patient, and we'll get there.